So first of all, do we have any questions just about the Pony Express? Anything that came up in the film that anybody has a question about right now? Okay, so I think I want to start off with Sam, okay, who you'll recognize from being in the film. And I think if you could tell a little bit just about the country that we cover.
Okay. I really don't need this because I talk loud anyway. So as most of you know, Nevada is a basin range. So we have really tall mountains, really flat valleys. We're either in the snow or we're super hot. And that's exactly what we ride in. We do ride 24/7 in all types of weather. When this was shot, we were riding in 105 degrees across the Fallon bombing range, out past 50 on our way to Cold Springs. This past year, in Woodford's alone, we went from 90 degrees at noon to thunderstorms, hail, and lightning within an hour and a half as we headed into Carson City. And our riders were drenched, we were sweating, and then we're wet. So we're wet one way or the other. But as you can see, especially in the more populated areas, so from Woodford's to Carson City out to basically Fort Churchill Road, just east of Dayton, we are along the highways for the most part, riding in the city. That first horse you saw in the city that was white, I think we were riding past the Carl's Jr. That was me, that was in Carson City. So we are right along Highway 50, right along traffic, usually about 5 o'clock, either direction that we come on those days. The further east we get, the more rural we become, the more we're actually on the trail itself. From Fort Churchill east through to the Sand Springs Station, that is original trail. We are off-grid, and if the trail is passable, we're able to have our ham operators and our horse trailers behind us in case something happens, as well as to be able to exchange riders after every couple of miles. Most of us ride 2-mile stretches at a time, and then we switch Mochia to another pony, and then they ride 2 miles. The further east we get, the more into the mountains we are. So from Austin to Eureka, the stretches often are 10 miles because we have to get up and over the mountain ranges, and there is no other way to do it other than by horse. And the only way we can get in is at a canyon where there's already a road. And then we'd switch horses and they'd go up and over the next mountain range. And then we get into our Ely section, and as you heard Tony say, they have 5 mountain ranges in that 144-mile section that they're in charge of all the way out to Utah. And again, these are tall mountain ranges. There is often still snow up there at the early part of June if our ride is at that point. This year our ride is at the later part of June, so we're kind of hoping the snow's going to be melted. Last year, as you're all aware, we had Snowmageddon, and winter lasted from October to April. Most of our trail was flooded. We could not get horse or tire across it without getting stuck. So a lot of us had to ride Highway 50 all the way out to Utah. So it wasn't ideal, but the pony still ran with the male on the back of a horse, doing its job all the way across the state, and we still did it.
Let me pass it over to Arthur, and then I'll bring it back to you about how your horse did. And so Arthur was, both Sam and Arthur, we actually have royalty here. They have been presidents of the Nevada section. And let me just say about our Nevada section that we have more original trail than any of the other states. You know how we always know ourselves that we think Nevada is one of the best states, right? We all feel that, right? Even if we don't make a lot of noise about it. And this is one of the reasons why our state's really great. It's because we have a lot of original Pony Express trail. And Arthur's been doing this for a while, and I would love to have you tell him a little bit too about some of the experiences of your section, like riding through the night.
Well, I've been doing this since 2009, and every year has its own excitement and challenges. One particular experience that I'd like to relate is from a station, an old station out on the other side of Austin called Dry Creek. I was waiting at Dry Creek, had been up for about 2 days before that, and then got a couple hours of sleep. The mail got to us, and there was actually another rider that had never been over the trail, had arrived that night and was going to carry the mail to the top of that mountain range. So she needed me to guide her, which I did on my horse. We started out about 3 o'clock in the morning. It had some thunderstorms during the night, and so stuff was wet, and we made our way up to the top of the mountain. There was another rider that had spent several hours waiting for us there, and we passed off the mochila. And as we came back down the mountain to our camp, through the brush, the sun was coming up, and the bushes and pine, pinyon pines had drips of water on them, and the whole morning was just lit up like there was a diamond hanging from every little piece of plant that you could see. And as we continued on down off the mountain, this great majestic buck stood up not more than 10 feet from us. And, there just isn't any way, my words fail to describe that particular morning, that particular scene. Now, there's, every other kind of experience, riding through the night with just the stars over your head, and there's no one else around. Some of the places are too rough. Even the ham radio guys have to go around by road, and you're just passing through with your horse, your horse's hoofbeats, the stars, the moon. Just, there's nothing like it. It's very unique. And to think that, in your mind's eye, you're back that 150 plus years ago, and you're one of those riders going across there. The only thing about today is we don't have any bandits or anybody chasing us down or shooting at us, so we have that difference. But anyway, it's pretty special. There was some question about some of the springs. That's how this came up. And the one I'd like to mention is that when you go out here toward Sand Mountain on 50, there's a Salt Wells little spot there, and if you head to the south, there's a geothermal plant out there. And if you wind your way around through that geothermal plant and you go off to the east more, there's a thing there called Rock Springs. Now, I've been through that area for 12 years or whatever. It wasn't until last year that I became aware that there's Rock Springs there, because it sits off of the trail a little bit. Enough of the sand dunes hide it. You don't see that it's there. But it's really an amazing thing out in the desert where there's no water, and if there is any water, it's salty and whatever, and there's the Rock Springs that has water. It's not maybe your ideal water, but it sure beats nothing on a hot day with, in the desert. So anyway, that's one of the springs that I know about. And another one, they had to have water back at Sand Mountain Station, but today there's no sign of a spring there at all. And yet there had to have been back in 1860, or they couldn't have had a station there.
I can actually add to that. So last month we had a Pony Express meeting in Eureka, and I decided I'm going to stop at the Sand Springs station at Sand Mountain. Well, what's neat about what they've done there is there's about a half-a-mile interpretive trail that is really educational. And yes, it's on sand, so we got lucky. The sand was wet, so it wasn't hard to walk through. But one of the informational stops was actually how they got water for the Sand Springs station. They hand dug wells, And there's one that is still there, and it's full of water. Now, the interesting thing about it is it was brackish. You can't drink it. So what do you do in chemistry to get a pH of 7? You add an acid, you add a base to an acid. So they would pull out the water that would bubble up, put it in a bucket, add vinegar to it to make it a pH of 7 and make it drinkable. So that's how they made water out there. And one of the other things I wanted to mention about sand springs, cold springs, and most likely also rock springs is you saw the rock walls. That was it. What you're staring at is the actual relay station that the Pony Express had. There was no ceiling. So these guys were exposed to all the elements, and so they would often huddle in a corner. You saw it in the Cold Springs pictures that there was a fireplace. So they'd actually make a fireplace out of the rocks so they can attempt to stay warm. But they were open to the elements. They would get wet. They would get snowed on. There was no place to hide from the heat, from the sun. But so Nevada has the harshest environment for any Pony Express rider. If you head to California, if you head towards Utah, they all had wood. They were able to actually make cabins and roofs. Nevada, we did not have that. We had volcanic rock. And what you're seeing is what our riders had to deal with back in 1860 and 1861.
So thank you for talking about that. And I wanted to say that this year, as we said, we're riding west, and we will be going through South Lake Tahoe, and there is a Pony Express station there. Some of the people in the audience know about that one. It's called Friday Station, and it's right near the golf course there. I think, what's the name of that golf course? Edgewood. And that looks like, if you're an historian, if you're studying history and you look at a picture of that, you have an image in your head of how it might have been in the old days. But then you look at the rock ones here, and it's like the history feels so different time-wise. Feels like it must be much, much older in Nevada, and yet it's at the same time. So I don't know what it was like for the Pony Express riders, if they even had time to think about that, but as they're riding sort of through history, different phases of history. So now we don't have a whole lot of time, but I want to just pass the mic over to my daughter Tess, because I'd like her to just talk about how her horse did. Because when we filmed, she was going to take out that, I don't know if it's a thoroughbred, you can tell. I'm sure, how many people are horse people in this audience? Because I think there are a lot of, yeah. So, you might appreciate these different breeds, right? And so this is not a horse you would think that would be a Pony Express horse. But tell us how it was for you to be a rider, and also how you got involved with being a rider, and then what it was like to be out there with your horse.
Sure, yeah. Well, I'll start so the first year you kind of mentioned it, I came along to help you and help you do the filming. But I ride horses, and so I thought, I'll throw my boots and a pair of jeans in just in case. And it didn't take too long. We were going down the road filming that we started talking to Arthur. And Arthur said, well, we could maybe use a rider. I'll bring a horse. And so that fairly quickly shifted from me being a helper with the video part to then being a rider. So I got on Arthur's horse and rode about 5 miles, and then continued down the way and met up with a friend, Christina, and then that was the heat of the day. It was, 100 degrees. We were all burning up, and Christina told me, she's like, yes, please help me ride. I don't want to do this by myself. It's too hot. We can switch every 2 miles. So then I got on Christina's horse and helped her through a section, and then continued further east past Austin. That was section 8. There was yet another horse that they happily accepted a rider. So I helped in that section. And I think caught a bit of a bug. There's an adventure that happens, and every year it changes, and the challenge changes, and the horses change. And so at that point I was like, I've got to come back next year and bring my own horse. So at that point I had Lotto, a very fancy Oldenburg. He is a hunter jumper, tall, beautiful, gorgeous gray horse, 17-1 hands. I thought, yeah, this is a good idea. Let's bring Lotto. not a terrible idea. I walked him up a road to the starting location that was about 4 miles up the road. We got there and we had to wait for at least 2 or 3 hours. Lotto isn't great at waiting. He doesn't know that game. He's used to very fancy show barns where, you know, he's got a groom that tacks him up and holds him in the stall. And so standing on the top of a mountain for 3 hours wasn't really his cup of tea. By the time the rider finally arrived and we switched the mochila, he was spinning in circles. You know, at 17 one hands, it's hard to get on a horse that tall. So then I had to try to find something to climb on to get on top of Lotto, who was spinning at the time. And then made the mistake of running back toward the place that he had spent the night. And those of you who know horses, I mean, that was the most exciting thing. So we spent about 4 miles just galloping and bucking the entire way, which was, you know, exciting, and we had speed, but maybe a little nerve-wracking. Also, Lotto had a bucking problem in general, and so that's when I decided, you know, this might not be the ideal Pony Express horse. So then last year I did it again, and I had a new horse, Peach. That's the black one that you saw. Peach is incredible. I think I put a Western saddle on her one time before the ride, and she sort of handled it. When we got to the Pony Express, we had the same situation where she's, you know, spinning and we're trying to get the mochila on and she's leaping out of the trailer. But where Peach was amazing is that as soon as I got on her, then she knew what her job was. And we started going and she took off at a pretty good gallop, and we galloped for a while, and then the big president of the Pony Express told me, she's like, you have to slow down, you are going too fast, you're gonna get there too soon. Peach and I did about 8 miles at a gallop and got to the section we were supposed to switch off, but last year, because of the weather, it had rained out the trail, and we were supposed to pass it off to someone who would take it up the trail. At that point, we had to actually take the road instead, and so there was an additional like 20 miles to pick up, which, like I said, part of the adventure is sort of dealing with these things that happen as you get there. And so I said, well, I don't know, Peach still has energy. It seems like she wants to run, so I might as well just keep running down the road. So then sure enough, we galloped another 4 or 5 miles down the road. It's the best thing Peach has done. I will bring her again this year. She couldn't have had more fun, and really it's neat to find these like English show jumping horses that have come from show jumping barns, really find a love of just galloping in the open space, not in an enclosed arena, and being able to go really as fast as they want. So those are the horses that I brought on the rides.
And I want to say, Tess, that I don't know if you've ever met the owner of the first horse that you rode, but Arthur's wife, Melody, is right there. And I don't know if you guys ever met, but Tess jumped on this horse, I guess in Carson City. You said, well, he probably is okay. So she kind of rode the horse around for a little bit in Carson City, like 5 minutes. And then we met you you said, meet us out at 2 a.m. on some road, like, and I'm thinking, 2 a.m., it's going to be dark. How do we even see the horse trailer? But we just started driving out there, and sure enough, there was Arthur. So it really is an adventure to be out there. Is there anything, we're going to be running out of time here, and there are refreshments afterwards, so don't run away. But yes, let's take a question.
Yeah, you were saying you only ride like 2 to 5 miles at a time. How is that different from the Pony Express riders back in the day?
Okay, so the question was that we do 2 to 5 miles maybe, and in the old days they had to do longer stretches for the most part, and some of them, you could answer this better than I, Arthur. There's some really interesting stories about how far people had to go, but there's a variety too. So Arthur.
So when the horse was the only means of transportation, I think they bred them a certain way, and they were probably a lot like this horse that Tess was telling us about that bucked for 5 miles. I'm guessing that these Pony Express riders were wiry, good riders, and they got on some pretty rank horses, and they didn't have a problem going 15 or 20 miles, and that's how far it was between stations. Because of the invention of cars and motorcycles and quads, we don't ride horses that are, you know, that far every day. We don't use them for our main means of transportation. So we all try to buy and breed horses that are okay from the moment you get on. And by their very nature, those horses don't have as much endurance. Now, Sam here has an endurance horse, and it doesn't buck, and it goes for miles and miles and miles and miles. And, you know, my hat's off to her. But my horses are the American paint horses, and they're this, you know, bred from quarter horses. The quarter horses got their name because they did so good for a quarter mile. A quarter horse is really good for jumping out fast and getting you within range to where you can rope a cow or whatever, and cutting, you know, getting in front of a cow, turning it back and stuff like this. So, you know, quarter horses and paint horses just don't have that long endurance. So, you know, it is quite different to have horse trailers and be able to change frequently than having a station in 15 or 20 miles that you had to get to. So there's quite a distinctive change from what they did in 1860. But my horse can run hard out for 2 miles, and I can put her in the horse trailer, get out another horse, run it hard for 2 miles. Somewhere around 3 horses, you know, 6 miles down the way, I can get my horse out again and she can run hard for 2 miles. And by that means, I can keep a pace probably in excess of the 8 miles an hour that it takes to do this, and we can keep going. If I just tried to ride my one horse for 8 to 10 miles even, she gives out and the pace gets slower and slower, and she'd be finally back to around 4 miles an hour. So hopefully that answers your question. And by the way, my horse walks fast. She walks at 6.
Okay, we have a question right here.
I was curious how the route.
I'm curious about how the route for the Pony Express Trail was developed. In other words, did somebody go out and survey the route that the horses would follow? And did they also determine how long each leg would be? Or was it something that the riders figured out as they went along?
You gonna take this question?
Yeah. So based on the history, as you heard from Donna, a lot of the trail, especially probably out here, was Native American trails, and they needed to find water. And the stations needed to be near water so the horses that they had at the station could be well rested and well hydrated so they can do their next 10 to 15 mile leg, because most of the stations were 10 to 15 miles apart all the way across the trail. But most of the riders would take the path of least resistance, like was stated in the video. They were, the Native Americans were curious as to what's going on and, you know, why is the expansion coming this way? So the Pony Express riders were chased a lot. They were shot at. Very few actually died. The most deaths actually came from the station managers that were managing the relay stations. So those guys unfortunately lost more of their lives and more of the horses than the riders did themselves. But as for who actually surveyed it, I'm pretty sure Major Waddell and Reed probably paid people and said, hey, find us something and make it happen.
And that happened I mean, obviously that had to have been set up before the riders started.
Correct.
The service.
Yes.
So a lot of things along the Pony Express Trail are called Simpson. Right out here, there's Simpson Pass. Over out of Austin, there's Simpson Park Station. Somewhere else, there's Simpson Road. The reason for that is there was a guy with the last name of Simpson that surveyed the trail and got it set up for the Pony Express owners. The thing is that they made the decision to do it, and they were in a very big rush to get these stations set up and get horses moved out here to be able to do it. And I don't have that stuff at the top of my mind to be able to explain it. I've read several books about it and, you know, and stuff, but I can't explain it right now. But I don't know if it was like 3 months, 4 months, it was a certain amount of time. They did a phenomenal job coming out across the whole West and having Pony Express stations every 15 to 20 miles. The survey by this Simpson had been done a year or two earlier. And so they had that on hand to say, okay, let's do this. Now we're going to put a station here, here, and here. I think that the trail was largely followed by freight wagons prior to the Pony Express starting.
Great, thank you. We'll just take a couple more questions here. I think there was one right here.
You do have thoroughbreds and stuff racing, but do you have better luck with an actual Mustang, one that's trained for endurance? I mean, they're out there in the field and...
I do.
Okay. And how many times when they leave Missouri to get to Sacramento, how many groups of horses do they, how many times they send out from Missouri during the daytime? Or are they just one man per day, or 10 men per day, or how do they do that?
Ooh, how many riders do we have
Right,
total?
I guess that would be.
Maybe this is a good question for Sam or Arthur. How many riders do we actually have as across the whole 9 states?
8 states.
8 states.
8 states. So the National Pony Express Association is made up of 8 states, all 8 states of the original trail. Each one is their own division. So each state is responsible for their section of the trail. So over all 8 states, there are over 600 riders that carry the mail every year. And each state sets their trail system up the way they see fit.
Right, and there was a question back here.
Thank you. Do you have to have your own horse to volunteer as a rider?
Let's see, who wants to answer that question? I mean, Tess got pulled out of the car onto a horse, but that was because Arthur happened to have one along. So how do we answer that?
Short answer, yes. We have a lot more people who would love to ride that don't have horses, and that's what we're running into nowadays. With the horse population decreasing out here in the West, is there's no place to own horses. But for the ease of doing the re-ride, yes, if you could have your own horse, that would be great, because not all of us have extra horses we can have people ride. And you may not want to ride all the way out in Woodfords if you live out here in Fallon, because you got plenty of room out here to ride on the Pony Express Trail. But if you know somebody who will let you borrow their horse, that would work too.
Okay, I think we're just about out of time here. We want to give you a chance to have refreshments, but you can certainly keep the conversation going. We want you to come up and take a look at the mochila here that Arthur brought in. And remember, if you ride, you get to sign it too. You put your name on it. So that's pretty cool. I want to give a couple of shout outs here to Roger right here. Just put your hand up, Roger. Roger has been a support person on the Pony Express. Really, I mean, you have to have the support people.
Yes.
Right? So it doesn't mean you have to ride a horse to be part of this. We need volunteers. Let's see, I wanted to also say that the question has come up if there's copies available of the films. You can have the YouTube link, so it's totally free. And please use them as you like. There is a longer version. Those were excerpts in the film that the first one. We have a whole like a 7-minute one of Donna Cassette in the museum over there. The exhibits to do with Paiute land. So we kept that whole thing as its own video. Then there's a whole video of the archaeology with Dr. Don Hardesty. And one of the cool things about that is that those relics and artifacts sat in a warehouse instead, north of Reno, for years and years and years. And I knew they existed, but I'd never seen anything. And it turned out that no one, I mean, Don, he's long retired, he had done something with it and put out a booklet about it, but really we'd never seen those artifacts. And so then for the film, we were able to have the justification to get them out of the storage shed and get them into the museum and have Dr. Carolyn White talk about it. So we didn't want to cut that down, so that whole video exists as its own if you want to see the fuller archaeology. So we are going to, I think you're going to put them on the website, right, on your website. So thank you. Let me hand this to you.
Wait, can I say one thing? Yeah. So the letters that we carry are special letters that the National Pony Express Association creates. In the back on the little brown table is an application if you'd like to have a letter carried in this year's Mochia. They're $5 a piece. You do have to write a check and mail it to Kansas. We haven't quite got it to technology yet. But each year, a state is in charge of the letter, so it'll be specific to that state for the $5 letter. Next year, Nevada is in charge of conventions, so it'll be a Nevada-specific letter. There is also the ability to write your own letter for $10, and that's at the bottom of the little application page. What you do is you fill that out, send it back to Nationals. They'll send you back a blank page of the Pony Express stationery with the envelope. You handwrite whatever you want on it, and you have it sent to whomever you want. And then at the end of the reride, it'll get the commemorative stamp and then mailed to you or to whoever it is you wanted it to be sent to. Just after 4th of July is usually when we get them. Right. So in the back, there's letter applications.
Let's have a round of applause for our speakers.